watch lovers, you know what time it is. This evening I have two very special guests and my producer here, Gavin. So we have Gavin here and we have Sarah Staff. Sarah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. Spencer, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate to come along tonight. So, Sarah Staff, I'm a retired Detective Chief Inspector from the Metropolitan Police.
Top brass. Top brass.
Spent a lot of my career in the flying squad, and I think we have an opportunity tonight to talk about that, which would be great. Yeah. I retired from the Met 3 years ago as DCI on the flying squad, one of the offices. And I now work for the British Security Industry Association, and I run a policing initiative called Safer Cash. And we basically look at cash in transit companies. We represent cash in transit companies, independent ATM providers, and the banks and building societies. Absolutely. And it's all about the crime that affects them. The crime I used to investigate when I was in the flying squad, so it's a sort of natural transition.
It's part of the NHA, isn't it? National Association of Jewellers?
It is. So the BSIO also host another initiative called Safer Gems, and they look at all commercial robberies against jewellers and run a similar initiative with the police. So it's a really
well,
good...
when I had my stores, I remember it was really important, and it's great to get the notifications so that if something was going on, you'd be notified in your area to be on the watch.
Absolutely.
And the notification's fantastic.
Now, before we crack on, we better explain to the viewers that there's somebody on this show who, for obviously ultra high security reasons, we're not showing on film, which kind of makes me feel a bit James Bondy. But perhaps you'd like to introduce Kevin, Spencer.
Sure. So we have Kevin Parley here. I'm going to ask Kevin to explain a bit about what he does. And like Gavin mentioned, he's not allowed to be on screen, but I can assure you he is here. Yeah, he's most definitely here. Kevin, over to you.
Hi, Spencer. I'm Kevin Parley. I'm a current detective, constable in the Met Police. I've got 29 years service, and for the last 15 years I've been based at the flying squad working on commercial robberies. A lot of that is involved the last sort of like 10 years dealing with jewellery robberies, the smash and grabs, and I've been fortunate to deal with quite a lot of the high profile ones, and I've been even more fortunate to travel abroad as a result of jewellery inquiries, so I've got quite a keen interest in that. And I was fortunate enough to work with Sarah for a considerable period of time, and she was my colleague and boss for some of those years, so we've known each other for a long time.
Guys, for those viewers watching who haven't watched the Sweeney back in the day, can you tell everybody, perhaps, Sarah, what is the Flying Squad?
Right, it's a really unique unit, the only one in the country, and actually the title does go World Famous Flying Squad, which sounds a bit cheesy, but it's not. It's years ago, and it's now a lot smaller than it used to be, but there used to be 4 offices in the 4 parts of London with dedicated detectives who were also surveillance trained. So you'd be able to do your investigations, and they were brilliant at the investigations, but also to run surveillance operations and catch people in the act. So, and to coin a phrase we use, you catch them on the pavement. So as they're going across to rob a bank, rob a cash in transit, rob a jewellers, you'd catch them in the act. And we would carry a gun so that when those individuals were putting a gun to the guard's head or a gun to the jeweller's head, then we would be there to arrest them and take them out using the appropriate amount of force.
Well, it's interesting you should mention guns, because the first question in is from Edward French, and he says the Flying Squad used to have handguns. Do they still now, or alternatives? Kevin?
Yeah, they still carry firearms. They're Glock handguns, and they're still used, and officers are trained with those for their own protection. But now we use, a lot of the times we've got in operations, officers from SO19, which is the Specialist Arms Unit. They assist us with various jobs, but officers are still armed for their own protection during surveillance operations.
Spencer, I'm just going to lead you back in here. I know you're dying to say a word.
You know, guys,
how did you get to meet these guys?
I met up with Kevin. We had an incident where he was investigating about some stolen watches, wasn't it, Kevin?
Yeah. About 2016, I first met you, Spencer, as a result of dealing with a gentleman who we arrested who was linked to quite a substantial amount of stolen watches. And I was handed a certain part of the investigation by another officer from another flying squad office, and it's fair to say that she was struggling to get some information from Spencer, so she kindly handed me her dossier, and I went to speak to Spencer, and we sort of like exchanged a few stories and a few sort of like understandings of how we were going to deal with things.
I remember we had a bit of a disagreement, Kevin, if I remember, when Kevin first turned up. So Kevin said, I want this, this and this is how I want it, and you got 48 hours. And I was like, whoa, okay. So I said, look, I'm happy to help, but I need a week to prepare all the paperwork. And Kevin was not having it. Kevin, I think, said, you got 72 hours, but that is it. And he was really sort of heavy-handed and was having none of it. And I said, look, you know, it's going to take me a week. I said, get a warrant. So he goes, well, I will get a warrant if you want. And then we sort of calmed down. I said, should we just start again and see if we can like find some middle ground? So Kevin then understood where I was, and I got all his paperwork. And I think when he came back, well, you tell me, Kevin, what did you think of my paper trail, of my record keeping about this?
It would be fair to say that inquiry was actually one of the biggest ones that we did in the trail of sort of like one certain guy who was like just selling watches constantly, almost on a daily basis, to various watch outlets. Once we obviously got off on the right foot, eventually we started getting some great results with Spencer, because he was able to trace back all the paperwork, everyone he'd bought from, when he'd paid people, bank accounts, everything. So from that moment on, we sort of got on a lot better. We got some great results, got a fantastic result in the end, and I think that has paved the way for the way that I now deal with you, come to work with you, to get bits from you, and vice versa. You can come back and trust us at the Flying Squad, because you know if you want something done, we will get it done for you.
Sure. I mean, in the past, if someone you heard on the phone, or the police are on the phone, or the Flying Squad, people think, oh my God. Now, with what we do, every watch is watch register checked. When we buy watches, sell watches, we ask for ID, we do bank transfers. And this was the thing, Kevin had this paper trail of all the ID from this customer, signatures, paper trail, bank transfers, which helped him massively. And the same for us. And now, if I have any issue, or say, Kevin, I'm not sure about this, what do you think? So I'll give him a call, he'll have a look at it, Sarah, and guide me on it. And equally, Kevin sometimes has stolen watches or paperwork that doesn't match up, or ask me to verify whether something's genuine, and we'll assist the police, the Flying Squad, wherever it is.
And I think it gives people that confidence, doesn't it? You know, if you're going to go somewhere and buy a watch, especially a second-hand watch, you want to have the confidence that that is genuine, it's not a fake, and that it's got all the paperwork, and you have a confidence because you're spending a lot of money in buying a watch that it's got the pedigree and the background behind it, which is
that's
it's a funny endorsement to have on your business, isn't it? Endorsed by the Flying Squad.
But the thing is, in what goes on in our industry, people are always worried that they're not going to get paid, that they're going to get robbed. What is the watch genuine? And our whole thing, and I say this to people, and anyone who comes into my office, and Sarah's been in, so has Kevin, say, what's important for me is not the watch, it's the person, that the person feels confident. And if someone leaves deposit or buys a watch, if they're not happy, return it. If you've got any concerns at all. And this is the thing, but we can only do that because we check every watch, we have watchmakers, and all of these things are so important, so important.
Absolutely.
And, you know, since then, I'd say probably on a weekly or monthly basis, Kev will give me a call to ask about something, and anything that I'm not happy about, he'll investigate and have a look at. I mean, we had something recently, didn't we, Kev, where you were...
Yeah, somebody tried to sort of like say that they've sent a watch that's valued at nearly £40,000 to Spencer. Things didn't add up. His team have done a great job in tracing back the provenance of receipts, addresses, serial numbers on the watch, and then just for things to be dotted and crossed, Spencer asked me to look at something to check it out. Quite happily done that, and it's clear that somebody is trying to fraudulently obtain or claim that they've sent a £40,000 watch, which is clearly not there, with the paperwork and inquiries that your team have done, because they're obviously trained now to, I think, a very good standard, all of them, and they all seem to know the watch business.
As we've shown you, everything's on CCTV. You investigate things, we're insured, we're with insurance companies, and even the incident we had with Kevin when there was a problem, all our insurances, all of this to make people feel confident of
And
what
I
it
think that's such a good thing, because as an individual, when you're buying a watch, especially an expensive watch, it's a lot of money. You want to have that confidence. You want to know that you have got a genuine watch on your wrist. And you hear such awful stories about frauds and people making up watches and you've got to have that confidence. And I think that's why that relationship works
especially
really
in where
well.
you both come from. I mean,
Exactly.
this is what's
Let me ask you both a question, because I'm fascinated by you two, and I'm sure our viewers will be as well, because you are really on the sharp end of crime and previously, and I think that the viewers will be really interested to hear of maybe some of the interesting stories perhaps you could tell us about some of the robberies you foiled, or how you brought people to justice, or maybe what's a sort of the balls of some of these robberies as well, and they jump on the back of a pillion on a bike and snatch or something. Can you share with us and the viewers a story?
Well, a story I'd love to share with you, actually, not about myself first of all, but I just want to really highlight what the members of the public do and the bravery. So just to talk a little bit about the BSIA, we hold an award ceremony each year. We've got one at the end of June, and one of the categories is bravery by a member of the public. And over the last couple of years, we've had nominations from the Met Police, and one of them was where a woman foiled an ATM attack. So she's looking out of her bedroom window late at night in London and sees, and the viewers might know how an ATM attack happens. They basically have a 4x4 car, and they're ramming it into the building, and then they'll put a strap around it and pull the ATM out. So in order to do that, they've got to get out of the car to do it. And with that, and really quick-witted and quick-minded this lady was, she ran downstairs. There's 5 big burly blokes doing all of this, and she steals the keys from the getaway car and foils it. And then they're all standing there looking, and she foiled that.
Haven't you got the keys, Trevor?
So that's really brilliant, and she got awarded for that, which was lovely. And then only a couple of years ago, again, a nomination that came from the flying squad. 3 builders in London see a cash-in-transit robbery happening, and this guy had just been released after serving a sentence for murder. No regard for their own personal safety. They chase after this guy. There's a fight. He bites them. They manage to get the cash box off him, hold him down until the police arrive. So I think from that perspective, we see some really good, and my opportunity to sort of say thank you to the public, because without their support. But from the work that we do, and I'll probably let Kev tell a job first because he's more current, but I can tell a few little jobs. But Kev, if you want to talk about
a jewellery one, for instance, we had one a few years ago where we had some intelligence that a robbery was going to get committed at a jeweller's in the city, and our intelligence was it was a place that had just been recently done up. It turned out about 3 or 4 places in the city had all been done up roughly about the same time. So we waited and waited on this job for a couple of weeks. It was going to happen on one day. It was lead to the next. Eventually it happened at Mappin and Webb in Fenchurch Street. Unfortunately, we weren't covering Mappin and Webb in Fenchurch Street. We were covering another one. We were covering Watch of Switzerland by the Royal Exchange. Anyway, we managed to follow up inquiries that morning to where we believed the watches had gone, and we were able to wait until the guy who had the watches, there was 43 Rolexes that were stolen.
Just the 43?
Just the 43. Wow. He'd got people to go out and commit the robbery for him. He was waiting back at a flat in North London. We waited till the person, the handler as we call him, was coming around to have a look at the watches to offer it to him. And fortunately for us, we were able to wait till he went in, found the right flat, and it was quite lovely to go in, see the look on their faces as they had all the watches out on this table in the sitting room to arrest them, and as we call it, bang to rights. And with that sort of evidence, there is no room for manoeuvring there. And the guy, he got 12 years who had organised the robbery, and the handler that came to look at it, he tried to take it to court and run the case, was found guilty after a long trial, and then he got 7 years in prison for that. So that was along with the other people we arrested on part of that. So those sort of jobs are really nice to work on, and it's excellent when you can get the watches back.
And I think also it's about catching people. For me, having the phrase of the pavement job is the most exciting thing. So I was on the flying squad for 12 years, so I did every single rank. So I started off as a detective constable, a detective sergeant, and where you can run your jobs. And it might take you months and months to put a job together where these individuals are either committing one robbery or a series of robberies. but it's actually the very best evidence is catching them in the act. And I remember one down in Richmond, a jeweller's, these two guys on motorbikes pulled up to the jeweller's. One runs in with a handgun, steals a load of watches out of all the cabinets, and then comes back out. And that's when we put the strike in to take them. So I remember, because I was quite a young DC at the time, I was all dressed like a lady with a little baby in a pram.
You
with
were
my
literally
gun,
dressed
yes,
up and...
yeah, and
Wow.
had a little baby, not a real baby, just a little dolly, and my gun, and then and that allowed me to get really close, so that when we put the strike in and grab everybody, nobody would have actually known that I was a police officer and I was there to sort of do the arrests. But to actually catch the people, that's it, because you've got all the evidence you need. There's no.
When
looking
you
away from
guys
that.
watch television, I have to ask this: how close to real life is watching, a television show that's basically about the job you do?
There are so many programs out there, and I know when I first started my training, we used to work with the actors from the bill when you're doing your training, and we used to say, God, I wish it was like the bill, because within 25 minutes you've got a whole case
Amazing.
set and
Job done.
and it's not. So some of the programs, there are veins of truth around it, and everybody's watching The Line of Duty at the moment, and there are elements of it, but it's done for drama and it's done for entertainment value. But sometimes when you have a job like I've just described, it does feel like a movie because it's unfolding in front of you. But of course, you don't realise in the background it's taken months and months to put together and is pretty boring and, very gutty, long hours. I think.
But Sarah, at the end of it, there's probably a lot that carries on afterwards. Isn't
Oh, goodness me, yes, yeah,
Can
absolutely.
it be longer after the event?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Investigations can take absolutely months and months to get to court. And those days are, I remember doing 100-hour weeks. So I used to go to work at sort of 7 o'clock on a Monday morning, sometimes sleep in the office because the days were so long, and then get home on a Friday night. So you do some really long hours because there's so much work to do. And then once somebody's arrested and charged, and that's really when putting the whole case together can take forever and ever.
We just had a question come in, actually. Actually, there's two comments. First of all, there's somebody called Geezer who says, the lady's got a great jacket.
Oh, thank you very much.
Done. And also, Edward's
Good
back with another
lining.
question.
My lining.
Edward's back with another question. He says, the Flying Squad, an extremely successful unit. Why is it not replicated in other parts of the UK, or is it?
That's a really good question, and it's not, which is a real shame, because in my current job, I'm working with all 43 police forces, and when I see a series of jewellery robberies that are happening, say, out in the north, I wish there was a unit that could take it on, because the Flying Squad take it on immediately as soon as the crime happens. So they have something called a bank car that goes out to that crime scene as soon as it happened, witness statements, does a really thorough investigation, and then takes it on. And unfortunately, other police forces don't have the resources to do that. And if they have a series of jewellery robberies, they then have to go to another unit in order to get a surveillance and proactive response. So it's a real shame that the Met's been very lucky. So the Flying Squad's been around for 100 years. I think it was 2018, was it the 100
18th
years?
anniversary, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been around. So it's a shame other forces don't have it, but it's just resourcing. That the Met is the biggest force in the country, so it has that luxury to have a dedicated, maybe 100 officers now, or maybe about 100.
Between two for the whole of
Do
London.
you want to make it 102? Spencer and I, we want a red letter day. We want a red letter day in your
So
car.
100 in the Flying Squad.
Yeah.
About 100 over 2 officers. So as Sarah said, there used to be 4, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and then about in 2013, due to, like everything, there's been a restructure of the police. So obviously, police stations have closed and joined, all amalgamated together. We did exactly the same. So London was split east and west. One office, we were at Barnes, and the Barnes and Finchley office moved to Putney. So there's an office there. And then the Tower Bridge Southeast and the North East Barking office, they all moved to Barking. So they will cover everything on the east of London, and we cover everything on the west of London. So it's split almost like from 12 o'clock
So how
to
many
6
offices
o'clock.
are there now, the Flying
Just
Squad?
2.
Just 2.
Just one in Putney and one
In the
in
east.
Barton. So it's a big area to cover. So you can be, Sarah said, you've got the bank car. So that runs every day of the week, Monday to Sunday, and you will run that from 10 a.m. because it covers obviously when commercial premises are open. So you could be out doing inquiries on another job, or you could actually be out sometimes supporting live operations on surveillance or whatever because of the shortage of numbers if you're out working. If you get a bank car job, say for instance you could be in Wandsworth or sort of Clapham, you might have to go up to Enfield, Tottenham to respond to a job. So it's important then for us to get the local officers there at the scene to do what they can, because when we come up, we take control of that investigation, and you're expecting them to have kept all the witnesses there because you want to get the statements to get your evidence straight away, because a lot of people might be passing, they give their details, and then it can be a job getting hold of them because, oh, I'm not available for a couple of days. And if you've got somebody that might be arrested as a result of that job that day, they might have been detained, you need to get everything there and then to try and get your evidence together for interviews to get them charged, because we only have 24 hours before we can get an extension to get them charged before they can get to court. So it's really important.
What size are your teams, Kevin?
My team, we've got 6 teams at the West Office, and it's usually 1 detective sergeant and 5 to 6 detective
and
constables.
Does each team specialise in one particular area? Like, does somebody do jewellery, for example, or robberies, or anything? You'd be assigned to anything?
We are effectively, so each team, each week it'll be a different team that will do the bank car, and we all work together. So a high proportion of the office are surveillance trained. They might be firearms trained, or they have other skills. But we also now, since 2019, as I said, the force restructured. We also take the flying squad help deal with kidnaps, whereas that's never done before. They had their own unit that dealt with that. So because the flying squad was seen as this unit, you can almost give them an issue, they will deal with it. That side of the investigation came to us as well. So you're on call for that as well. So there's quite a lot of responsibility goes with it.
We had a question that was asked by one of our Instagram followers earlier this week, because we put out a little Ask the Panel. They wanted to know, what's the biggest haul you've ever sort of stopped? What's the biggest sort of catch in terms of jewellery seized or robbery stopped?
Robbery stopped. So for me, in my early service on the flying squad, and I was on the peripheral of this, but it was the Millennium Dome. So the big diamond,
wasn't it?
And that was a great investigation. But of course, they replaced the real diamond with a fake. So even if the robbers had got away with it, they would have only got a fake. So for me, that's probably
What was the value of the diamond?
Oh my goodness
Well,
me!
they said it was several millions.
Millions
Wasn't it?
Wow.
and millions of pounds. So probably for me, you've been involved in.
I
Hatton
think the Hatton Garden inquiry, obviously that was run by one of the other teams, but I think personally was 2009, the Graph robbery in 2009, where 2 guys went in.
Was that in Harrods?
No, it was the one that was on Bond Street. The one on
Street.
Bond Street. So 2 guys had gone in. They'd actually tried to do it a couple of days earlier, but they were foiled by the security on the day. They thought they looked suspicious, and they'd basically got a makeup artist to sort of like dress them up in makeup, make them look older and make them more respectable. They went in, produced 2 handguns when they were in, put the staff to the floor, and they only got away with 17 items, but those 17 items were worth 43 million. Everyone was caught. It was a fantastic investigation, and we got several £1 million worth of the jewellery back, but it was all Graph specialised in the yellow diamond stones, and it was all pieces like that. So that was probably mine in 2009. That was a fantastic inquiry to work on.
Another question's come in for you, Kevin, which is from Annabelle S. Do more jewellery robberies take place in London than any other part of the country?
I think London is obviously the biggest city, so you'd think there'd be more, but there's certain areas, obviously from getting all the safer gems updates. I think Birmingham is quite a busy area because it's got a big jewellery district, especially with a lot of the Asian gold there, because that's worth quite a lot of money, and gold's the value of gold, as you know, is going through the roof. Liverpool, Manchester seems to be the other 2 prominent places, because obviously there's a lot of high-end jewellers up there. The Northwest got a lot of wealthy areas with obviously the football and the Cheshire sort of areas, but I would say that. But London does tend to get a lot, and it's more high profile.
And Sarah, we're going to have a question here for you as well. Ian Cooper asks, what is a reasonable reaction to mugging attack on an individual? Just let them have what they've worked hard for, given very little is done for us other than a crime number for insurance purposes.
Right. Okay, so is he sort of saying, what should we do? Let the criminal take it. I'd say that your personal security is, no item is worth taking a risk. And very sadly, we've seen so many fatal stabbings in London and the rest of the UK. I think I'd say just let them have it. But and even now when I'm retired, I'm very vigilant about who's around. So when you're wearing a watch, I like to keep it covered up. I try not to walk around looking at my mobile phone. And if I am, you've got to be aware of what's around you, so that if you see somebody that looks a bit suspicious or you feel like you're being followed, then you can either go into a shop, now they're open, or you can just cross over the road.
Or dress up as a mother with a baby.
So it's about being, and sometimes I think we're all wearing the little pods now and listening to stuff as we're walking around. That can often make you less aware of your environment, and it's so important to be vigilant of that for your own personal security. And I always make sure my bag's done up, and just to be really careful. But if somebody tries to steal something from you or produces a knife or something, just let them have it, And I know it's really hard and it's a personal item, and sadly the police often don't find those individuals unless the flying squad around the corner and see it happen, and then they'll go and arrest them. But it's not worth taking the risk. It's
just on the back of what Sarah says there. I understand the question that the guys asked, but what you'll have to find is a lot of the robberies that are committed, say it's an alone person where they've had their watch stolen, that will get reported. And yes, he says you just get a crime number, but they'll be committed in areas where, especially the high proportion of the robberies are committed in the Westminster area, because Westminster is where most people, when things are back and open again, are out. That's where the majority of people who have nice watches are going to be wearing them. Westminster Council have done away with the council CCTV now. It used to be surrounding everywhere, so the officer who will
you may not want to shout that too loudly.
And sadly, it's what they've closed down because of the financial restrictions. But so the officers there are limited to, obviously, they might get a description, because sometimes the people have been out on a night out, they'll be jumped from behind, or they just won't have much of a description of the assailant. Then if they don't have their serial numbers and things, they can get reported straight away. That officer might not be in for a couple of days after due to the shift pattern, whatever. So it's difficult when it's a one-off type, snatch type situation, and I can understand that. But sadly, the investigator is only as good as sometimes the information he can get and what resources are available to him to look for other clues, if there are witnesses, etc. And we all know a lot of people like to look away rather than getting involved for their own safety, and I can understand that, because we don't want anyone to jump in to get themselves hurt. But there are things, if it is a more serious matter like a jewellers and stuff, the flying squad generally do take them on, and hopefully we can get that back. But I do understand the issues there.
But just leading on there from Kevin, this is something we do. Every watch we handle, whether they be for service or buy or sell, taking the model and serial number. And I've spoken about this before to viewers. Sometimes they buy a watch, they throw the box in the loft, something happens to the watch, they lose the watch, and they forget about the papers. Really important, and we've mentioned this time and time again, to keep a note of your serial numbers, not only with your watch, but separately. So if you do suffer a robbery, Kevin, I was speaking with a customer only recently who unfortunately got robbed, his safe got taken, and his watches are gone, but all the boxes were there. So I said, give me all the information, and again, we've logged that, and we put that with the watch register. And over a period of time, watches do turn up, because eventually what happens is we service a watch. Sometimes it needs a part. It goes back to a manufacturer, whether it be Patek, Rolex, AP. So if it's flagged there as stolen, at least it may not be at the time, but as time goes on, that watch will be mentioned. Oh, that was involved in a robbery in 2016, logged with a crime number. So then if something happens, that watch is taken and returned to the rightful owner, and it does happen.
Is that a thing, Smith? So if, for example, my watch got stolen and it got sold on twice and then it came into you for service, would I end up with my watch back?
Eventually, what would happen is it would be noted that the watch had been involved in a robbery, and we'd have the crime reference, and we could get it back. Sometimes the longer it may take quite a while before it comes out, because if a watch is quite new for 3-5 years, doesn't need any service, then the glass gets damaged, then it needs something where it has to go back, because certain parts are restricted So it has to go back to the manufacturer. Then when it's back at the manufacturers, they will say, wow, there's crime being committed on this. So this is why I always say to viewers, first of all, make sure you keep your papers safe, but also keep a note of the model and serial number. So if your watch is stolen and it's at home where they steal your box as well, that then you've got a chance.
I've noticed you're wearing a different watch tonight, actually. It's the first time I've seen you wearing that. Why don't you show the viewers what you're wearing this evening?
There we go. We put the Hulk on.
I've never seen that on you.
See that one?
Do you guys like watches, by the way?
Love watches.
You do?
Yes.
Tell me.
Absolutely.
What's your? I mean, we'll get to one of those questions later. But what watches in general do you like?
Right. So I've got a Breitling on at the moment. So and this my husband gave it to me. So it's 20 years old, which is lovely. I've got a Oyster.
It's time for a new one, Spencer. You need to speak to her husband.
I've got a Oyster Rolex, which is lovely. I love that. We also, through the Flying Squad, have got a limited edition Bremont watch. So we were able to commission through Bremont 50 unique watches. So my one that I got, I don't actually wear it. I've given it to my husband, but it's got my warrant number on it, and also you get a central number.
That's so
you
lovely.
get a, and then it's got a hologram. Is it called a hologram, Kev?
Yeah, it is.
A hologram of the Flying Squad. So it's an eagle. Is the logo for the Flying Squad. And
Funnily
so it's
enough.
got yes, for the Flying Squad. And so that's a special watch for me. So I only have 3 watches myself, but Kev's got
Kev,
a
what have you got?
I like. Well, I started off when I was younger. I used to like watches, and then sort of like when you used to have a part-time job, I think I started with swatches and bits and pieces, and then got into tag watches, and then when I first got made up to a detective in '98, I think I bought my first Rolex Oyster, and I remember then, well, you could get discounts from jewellers then. I think I got about £300 off, and then started from then, and then bought Omegas, Breitlings, and then changed them around a few bits. So yeah, I've got a few that I like, but which helps when you do this sort of work and inquiries.
Amazing. There's a couple more questions that just come in. Here we go. This is from Psychic Wayne Isaacs. Do you set up undercover plants to trick robbers that are really police wearing luxury watches and arrest them if they try to rob you?
There are operations that are targeting areas where robberies have been committed for watches. So they'll go out to look for people there. Previously, they have used decoys, but I think due to the level of violence and things that are used now, and obviously the value of some of them, they're harder and harder to justify. So it's predominantly just targeting areas where you think something might happen. So you'll put officers to sort of be in that area. So if they see something, they can respond to it quicker.
I guess the thing for me that I see from the Newswise that's changed in terms of robberies is it's quite basic. It's gone through time. You know, a robbery is a hold-up's a hold-up, but it's getting a little bit more worrying and violent. I'm sure back in the 70s you'd smash a window, grab a watch. Now it's a little bit more guns, knives, and a bit scarier, Kevin.
Yeah, well, as you've seen, weapons have become like carrying a mobile phone to some people, and obviously knife crime in the last few years has gone through the roof. Lots of younger people use it. So people that go out to commit robberies, if they are hell-bent on getting what they want, yes, they will use weapons. It used to just be for the jeweler shop, so they still tend to. It's the sledgehammers. They sometimes go in with axes to scare, to warn off people.
Yeah.
Exactly, and then there'll always be people that remain outside on bikes and whatever to sort of scare off the crowds if they're coming towards them, to give the guys inside a bit of time to smash their cabinet, whatever. So they do use weapons in respect from in that side of things. And obviously, if you're going to get threatened on the street with a knife, as Sarah said, just give them the watch. You don't sort of like fight with.
We had another Instagram question earlier this week from Artisan Curation, who seems to ask a few questions each week. And this one was, what's the biggest Laurel and Hardy robbery you've ever seen where literally they've just tripped themselves up?
God, that's a good question. Well, it's funny, you mentioned, Spencer, you started off, you had a shop down in Tooting. So we had, again, it was an Asian jewellers down there, sold a lot of the gold. It was really busy because they used to do a lot for weddings and bits and pieces. And it had a very good airlock door in there. And what I think the robbers didn't realise is the Asian community in Tooting are extremely tight and very strong. They all look out for each other. If they've got jeweller shops, clothes shops, restaurants, you name it. So these two guys had gone in. They got through the door and then gone in and obviously started smashing up and got the stuff. They didn't realise they couldn't get out. So by the time they were waiting to get out, word had got outside, and there was quite a lot of the local community waiting for them. So the only people that got through the airlock door were the local community before the police got there. And let's just say the two guys, when they were arrested, were glad to see the police so they could get out alive, I think. But that was quite a funny one because they just got it completely wrong and chose the wrong place to rob.
And crime, robbery is quite a basic kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for now, but it's quite a basic crime to commit. Are they really well thought through, or is it really just a spur of the moment thing, do you think, for a lot of criminals?
So you get a mixture. You absolutely do. You'll get that. And if we look at like a cash in transit robbery as an example, somebody might be walking along the road and see a cash in transit guard doing a delivery and think, right, I'm going to snatch the box and do that. Or there are the really well planned, if you talk about the Millennium Dome, they planned that for months and months and months because they had to get all the getaway vehicles, they had to know when the jewellery was there. So some criminals are career criminals and they will plan, and you look at Hatton Garden, that it took months of planning and obviously they got caught. But so yeah, you get and you do get desperate people that, you know, and sadly you do feel a bit sorry for them sometimes. They're at the bottom of, you know, their luck and they decide, okay, I'm going to go in and rob a bank. Well, then you end up and spend 10 years in prison. So
what do you think the ratio is of convictions versus when you're investigating someone? I mean, not everything can be an absolute win for you guys, or is it meticulously planned so that it is the case?
Oh, good question. Smash and grabs, you tend to know the teams with intelligence that comes in that do it, but again, sometimes there could be one or two down the line before you get your leads to catch them if you don't get anything in the day. So that's a hard one to gauge, but generally when they do get caught, they do get good sentences, like so anything from like 7 up to 12 years for those type of offences, more if they use weapons. The street robbery offences where jewellery's taken, as I explained, that can be harder because they are quick robberies where people are robbed and then away very quickly without getting much of a description. If there's not a car or if they've gone on a bike, a lot of the things will tend to be on false number plates, so it's very hard to trace. So sometimes it can be very good for the conviction rate, sometimes it's not. It all depends, as I said, on what evidence you can get and what intelligence picture you can pick up as quick as you can, either before or after the offences are committed.
Howard Jackson asks a question. I'm not sure if you can answer this without giving away too many clues to everybody out there about how to become a criminal. How many criminals have black market weapons and how easy are they to get?
Oh God, well, people can get what they can off the internet, whatever. There's always somebody that can get something for them, so it's difficult to say how many, but yeah, of course there's weapons out there that people get hold of that they shouldn't have. I don't think we'd ever be able to sort of give a realistic figure because you just don't know until you arrest people or recover weapons. What we do recover a lot more now is the longer Rambo machete type knives that they've seemed to have come into vogue. All of a sudden it's almost like,
do you think it's because they're scary to look at?
Of course,
because of the size?
Of course, yeah. It is. Everything, the minute you have something like that, the physical sort of look of that to someone's going to think straight away, I don't want anything like that coming near me. Like a small knife, it's very rare you see people with small little lock knives now committing these things. It's the bigger things because it is the visual impact that it has, and it is devastating for people to see that.
Kevin, do crimes often go on a number of years before they unravel, or if a crime's committed, if you're going to catch someone, is it quite quick, or sometimes does it go on years before things come?
It can, can't it, Sarah?
It can go on for years, and if somebody decides to move around the area and move between different police forces, it's very difficult to often keep track of them, or they might commit one crime, steal a lot of money, and then go very quiet for a while and then reappear. So the police are always mapping and charting and watching what people are doing, but or the crime patterns, but sometimes it is difficult to catch somebody. But it might be years later that something that's been left at the scene, the DNA,
The forensics
will come back.
Clear up a load of crimes.
Absolutely. So constantly crimes are being looked at, and there's a huge database of unsolved crime scene marks that will constantly being checked. And if you get arrested for something unconnected, your DNA gets taken and then it comes back and you're identified, then you will be dealt with for that crime. So some crimes, and I remember dealing with one in Brixton, and this individual had been robbing banks probably for about 4 or 5 years, and we hadn't been able to identify them because they were a lone gunman, disguised, just didn't get any good CCTV or anything. It was really hard. And then we had a breakthrough because somebody phoned up Crime Stoppers and gave us some information, and then we were able to put together a job and actually catch them in the act of going in and robbing a bank, actually on a push bike. So that was quite an unusual form of transport, but he went to the crime on a push bike. But we
I
caught
remember
him.
always watching that. That was a great programme, Crime Stoppers.
Yes,
Was that Jill
Jill
Dando?
Dando, it was,
and all of that.
yes,
And I think
yeah.
it was really...
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
is.
I mean,
It is.
I watch these programs and I am sometimes in awe or amazement about how many people actually do grass.
Yes,
I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah,
would guess,
yeah.
I would imagine without people actually telling on them, their friends.
Yeah, Crime Stoppers is a great way of doing it because you don't have to leave your name and address. You can give confidential information, and it's a great way of being able to share that, and then the police can act on it, which is really good. And those programs, again, they're designed not to frighten the public because crime is still rare, and we've been really fortunate during the pandemic. Crime has really reduced, which is great, and I hope it stays like that for as long as possible. But it gets the public involved, and without public support and information, it would make the police's job much harder.
So John Pearl has asked, has it made arrests more difficult? Now we all have to wear a face mask.
Yeah, really hard, because, of course, when somebody goes in, it's a disguise. So before the pandemic, if you had a crash helmet on or a scarf around your face, if you went into a bank or a jeweller's, they would say, you've got to remove that. But now you can legitimately wear a face covering. And then, of course, the CCTV, you're only going to get a little bit of the face.
Yeah.
But, police work on distinctive clothing, the way that somebody walks, their tattoo, the way they speak. So there's lots of other forms of identification that can be used. But obviously, the face covering does make it a lot more difficult.
And in the watch business, or in the crime of jewellery, what's the most common thing? Is it a smash and grab, or is it now the sort of, we hear about the sort of the gangs of people that pull up on a bike and grab a watch or a phone or
Smash and grabs used to be, it probably would be if it was a league table, would be at the top. But as Spencer would say, the amount of people now, because the watches are getting copied, the fakes are getting better and better. The people trying on scams to, as you say, try to sell them through people like Spencer and other watch companies. They will try anything, the paperwork, they'll forge, whatever. So you're getting a lot of that as well, and distraction thefts in certain jewellers. So it's a mixture, because watches are such an expensive item now. So one watch can be up to over £100,000. So if you pick the right watch to do something with at the right time, it's a lucrative
Kevin, we
business.
see on a daily basis, a day doesn't go by without seeing a fake watch. And again, people send pictures in, and I always wait till I know it's 100% fake. But often I get the question, how do you know? How do you know? And it's not until we see the front, the back. There's so many different parts of the watch, and it's amazing how wrong they get things. But from the front, you can't always tell. Sometimes it's the back of the watch, the finish. You often have steel watches that say 750, 18 carat. You can tell from the boxes, the papers, the cards. There's so much. But don't get me wrong, there are some that are unbelievable how good they are.
So is counterfeit then a big part of what you do as well in terms of...
Counterfeit, not some... Yes, if you get... So, for instance, that story I told you about before, where we arrested the guys that did the venture, the handler, he had loads and loads of the old-fashioned Rolex. Before you used to get the card, it used to be like a paper certificate. Yeah. So we even went down to the guys down, I think is it Westmoreland, where the headquarters is down there in Kent now, where the Rolex HQ is. They were really good. We had to get an expert in to look at them to say, look, no, they're all fake. But they looked absolutely, they all had the perforations, etc. Because he was selling them. He'd a machine that he could perforate the numbers on to make them match with the watches. Yeah. And it's like, for the normal person who buys that, they're thinking, I've got a green Rolex box, I've got the watch, it looks the business, and I've got this certificate which is perforated with the exact number. I've been matched on the watch. But then when you look at it, it was just so much, the ink was just like about a little couple of centimetres out or millimetres out, and it was just, they were able to tell straight away. So some cases you get that, but we don't get so much in the way of counterfeit. I think the counterfeit happens more with the watch guys like Spencer and the others, that people are coming in to chance their luck, because they might try 3, 4, 5 places, they all get knocked back, but one person will be taken in by it, even someone who's been in the watch business for a while, because these fakes are getting better and better.
And they're not looking for them to be fake. This is the issue.
Yeah.
They're trusting.
Yeah.
If it comes in a box, a lot of people are swayed by that. Then they have the booklets and they just don't look for it, but it does.
So Spencer, if somebody walks into your shop and brings into BQ Watches and brings in a little tray of watches, and you spot it immediately, either that they're counterfeit, is that something you would report to the police, or do you just send them on their way?
No, we just send them on their way. Yeah, but we will look. But obviously, at times we speak with Sarah of Safe Gems and share information. If someone's come in and give us their name, we will share that information so that people are aware, so that if the person goes to different places, I mean, we're there the whole time to try and protect people. And we say this, and Kevin, we've been over this many a times. We're there to protect that someone doesn't buy something fake. They may buy a watch on eBay that sells for 10 grand for 8. It may be okay, but eventually they're going to get caught, because that's what people do.
Yeah. And there's too much of a risk to buy it on the internet. You just don't know what the
exactly.
background
And
of
without going where someone's a serviced office, or someone meets you in a coffee shop, or arranges to meet in a bank or a West End and then want to transfer. These things, I mean, we see that with Safer Gems the whole time. The amount of scams and how sophisticated, and that people use a little old lady or someone retired or someone with a walking stick, oh, this is my dad with me. I mean, I had a guy the other week who was telling me how someone's come to his house, left a deposit. They've then come back the following day and looked to rob them.
It's like, but you say to yourself now, for anyone that's going to go out and spend money on buying a watch, don't invite people to your house. Go to somewhere where somebody's got fixed premises, so if anything is wrong, you can go
Kevin,
back.
you need to say BQ Watches for that bit.
Well, exactly like Spencer. You've got to do it, because you want to see before it. You ask them, has this watch been checked? Does it come with everything that's there? You want to see it. And I know Spencer does, because he works with the watch register. He gets his numbers checked. He does everything he can. Obviously, he's with the Safer Gems, and they've got great information of the intelligence, because there isn't a better unit that covers anything. So if there's robberies around the country or crime trends in jewelleries, that gets sort of shared, and it's fantastic. I don't think the police could work without the likes of Safer Gems for the intelligence, and without a doubt the watch register, because it is great to be able to do the check straight away, because they can only do so much by telling someone the watch is stolen, because you'll get someone who says, well, I'm not going to give it back. They pass it on to us. We're able then to take that bit a stage further and recover it. And with working with companies like BQ, the watch register and Safer Gem, I would say in the last sort of like 5 years, our recovery rate has definitely gone tenfold for people, and it's great. And we had one literally just a few months ago. Lady had bought a GMT, a Rolex GMT for her husband. He'd been robbed on a night out in the West End. Sadly, he passed away before the watch was ever recovered of an illness. That watch was identified as a result of being put into the watch register for a check. We got it back, and she broke down in tears because she thought she'd never see it again, and it was so sentimental because it was something she'd bought for her husband's engagement before he sort of passed away. So I think that we would never have recovered that without the fact it's reported, and the sort of the watch register can get it back as a result of jewellers doing the checks on it. We couldn't do it.
Well, that's why every watch, and people say to you, we check every watch. So if something comes in, even if it was my brother, it's a member of the family, we check the watch. I mean, we've had instances where a jewellers we bought watches from had sold us half dozen watches, and one of them's come up as stolen. Inquired, and it was part of a robbery. The shop had a robbery, and they put it down as being stolen, and actually it wasn't stolen. They've got to tell the insurance company.
Whoops.
So it did it was a bit of a problem for them, but they got it cleared, and then we bought the watch. But if everyone checks a watch, then you've got no problem. And this is the thing. This is what, Sarah, what you do, Kevin, your job as well. If everyone does that, then it just saves the problem.
It's a great partnership approach.
And the other thing people must be aware of, that if you buy a watch and in 5, 7, 10 years, there's no limitation of time, that comes up on a stolen register. That watch is taken from you and returned to the rightful owner.
Yep.
And part of our insurance is, and us as a business, if that happens, you are protected. If you buy it from someone who you don't know, you will lose that watch and you can't go back to anyone. So that's why it's so important that you've got a company that you can rely on, that you've got an invoice from, that you can go back to them.
A couple more questions coming here, guys. I'm going to throw one out to you. First of all, there's who is this? James, who says, "Hi Spencer, thank you once again to yourself and Hilda for my Sea Dweller today. It's an absolute beauty. I can't recommend BQ watches more highly." And here's one for you guys to throw over from Psychic Wayne Isaacs. Second question from him. Watches can sometimes be stolen and taken overseas to sell. Do Flying Squad have a good relationship with police in other countries?
Yeah, we do. I said I was lucky. In about 20 years ago, in 2000, we had a job when I was at a different unit just before the Flying Squad, where we were watching a jeweller's in Notting Hill. It's not there anymore. It was called the Gold Box. And that venue at the time was taking jewellery from burglaries and things which were quite prominent at the time. It was just before the explosion of watches, when the footballers started getting into the watches, really getting interested in it. And we had this one we recovered from the guy. We arrested quite a few people as a result of this job, and this jeweller had a load of watches hidden in his house all over the place, behind bidets and the curtains, everywhere we found it. One of the watches was a really nice 18-karat gold Piaget watch, or how do you pronounce it? Piaget. It turned out it had only been stolen 12 weeks before from a really nasty robbery in Cape Town, South Africa. Well, fortunately, me and another colleague who works with me now at the Flying Squad, Gary Davis, we were fortunate to go and liaise with the South Africans and deal with them. So they are good and helpful. The FBI, we've done a lot of work with them. They are fantastic. And the Belgian police, because they're excellent with jewellery, they've got their own unit set up there. They are fantastic as well. So I'd say the Belgians, definitely the Americans, and the South Africans have been great. But we also have a unit within the police that liaise with all the European Europols, people there, and we've actually got officers that are embedded over in The Hague that work with them. So if there is problems, we can get things done. So we do have a good relationship with European forces.
There's another question that's just come in from Edward French again. Were the Flying Squad involved in recovering 12 million of fake money recently found, I believe it was Kent?
That money was believed linked to one of the old Securitas jobs, but it wasn't our office that dealt with that. That was something else.
Okay, that answers that one question for you, Edward. Good afternoon, I'm from Florida, says Kevin Hawthorne. You're global, Spencer. What do you think about that?
Lovely. Wish I was in Florida now.
How often during the year do you get goods in that are, that show up as stolen? Is it often? Is it a few times a year?
I would say it's probably less and less. It's maybe somewhere around 1, 2 every sort of 2-3 months, something like that. But sometimes it's from jewellers, sometimes it's private individuals. But if something comes into us, we phone up Safe Gems, Kevin will come and investigate, and they go from there, see what's gone on.
A question that maybe you can't answer for obvious reasons, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If I decided to change career and become a robber tomorrow, obviously it's going to be difficult, I think, because there's CCTV literally everywhere. But do you have the ability to, once a smash and grab's been done or a motorcycle holds up somebody, can you literally follow them all the way on their route to find out where they end up? Is there a limit to it?
No, there's no limits, because you've got... Most of London now has got cameras, especially the traffic and the TFL cameras everywhere. So yes, you can trace people, and once you can find out where the starting point is, and then you find out where the end point is, you sort of can work out the route, and along the way you'll get lots of members. The public have become more switched on to this. If they see groups of guys on mopeds, a lot of the times they might see a big yellow handle or something sticking out, because it's very difficult to hide these sort of like sledgehammers when they're on a moped, because there's not much room. So you can use the sort of like start point, obviously where the robbery's taking place, and then where they end up, put together, and then you can sort of piece together your trail there, and then from your intelligence piece together who those people may be or who you suspect them to be.
And Sarah, my one of my last questions for you. So you've now left the flying squad. Obviously, I think you were one of 2 female senior officers. Was that?
I was, yes. So in the 100 years of the flying squad, there's only been 2 female detective chief inspectors. So effectively, you're in charge of that branch office. And a colleague of mine before did it. She retired. Then there was another, a man did it. And then yes, my last 2 years of service, I was in charge of it.
And how do you find life outside of the flying squad? Like,
wow.
with the experience you've got.
Yeah, I loved my time. So my dad was a policeman. He did 35 years in the Met as more senior than me. And so it was in my blood. From about the age of 6, I knew I wanted to join the police. And I loved every minute of it.
I wanted to be a footballer.
Did you?
I still do.
Okay. I loved it. And flying squad, I did 12 years of it. So it was in my blood, dare I say it. And when I decided to leave after 30 years, it was a really difficult decision to make, because you're on that wheel and you're fighting crime without sounding sort of too coy about it all. But actually, because of the job I'm now doing with Safer Cash, I'm still working with the police. So I still, Safer Cash members provide contributions to the police for police staff posts around the country. So we're still working really closely with the police. Flying Squad hosts meetings for me, so I'm still able to hear what the guys are doing. So I'm still getting a little bit of it, but not doing the long hours and not doing surveillance and things. I'm probably getting a bit too old for that now, so I still get a little bit of it.
And Kevin, what's the best, most rewarding part of your job as a Flying Squad officer?
Oh, without a doubt, it's not just much when you have the job office, Sarah says, when you get people, catch them doing it. Yeah, you can work on a job for weeks, for months, a long time, and it can be gutty, as Sarah says. You can do horrible hours. Things might not happen when they're supposed to happen. It can get really frustrating. But then that time, that 30 seconds, that minute when that job happens and it's all stations go and everybody's out, the arrests are made, that sort of like small period, tiny little bit, is absolutely brilliant. And you think, God, that's just been a few months. And then at the end of it, after there's a lot of work goes into it after that, the amount of paperwork, the amount of hoops that we have to jump through when you've got not only the prosecution counsel who are presenting your case, but the defence counsel who will try and tear everything apart. They'll do everything. They're just working for their clients. But when they're convicted after sometimes very difficult, demanding trials, that is probably the best bit. When you can turn around and you can go back to your victims and say to them, we've convicted these people for you and this is what they've got. And they're like, that's the good bit, to get the sort of like reward back from them. 100%.
Amazing.
Kevin, can I just ask you, in the police, how many people are there in the police?
There's 30,000 in London,
Right.
about 100,000 nationally.
Yeah, there's 43 police forces across the UK. So, but the Met is the biggest
Right.
one with 30.
So you're saying the flying squad's 100. How come you both got into the flying squad? I find it quite intriguing. So what? How do you get there to?
You sort of so from a very early stage of becoming a trainee detective, you aspire to some people like to do fraud investigations, other child protection, and I'd always aspired to join the flying squad. I dare I say I watched the Sweeney, and I thought that looks like an amazing job. I think maybe from a female perspective, it was really hard to get in, and those early years was quite difficult because it was a very male-dominated environment, and I don't think they actually saw there was a place for a woman in the flying squad.
How many females are in the squad out of the
So
100?
when I joined, I think there were, within my office at Barnes, there were 3 other ladies, and there was probably maybe 50 people in the office at that time. So it was a very small percentage. But I sort of took the view, as did my other female colleagues, who I still see now. They're all retired. We have a little Sweeney girl group, and I still see all of them. You make the decision to work really hard. Doesn't matter what your sex is. You work really hard. But I think from a female perspective, you almost feel like you have to work just that little bit harder, because I think the men are maybe
so
waiting.
you have to prove yourself to get in there. So you're like really moving up to get there.
And I think it helped me when I then went back as a DCI. The fact that I'd worked there as a detective constable, detective sergeant, detective inspector, when you then come back as a detective chief inspector and the officers are coming in and maybe trying to tell you something, you've done it yourself, so you either know they're trying to have you over, or actually they are
did all the boys
truth.
have to call you mom?
Or gov, boss,
gov,
or
mom.
boss. Yeah, mom's a bit old fashioned, but yeah, boss.
Love
normally,
that.
yeah.
Such respect.
but it helps, because I think the guys on the team, they know that I've done it. I know the commitment that they put in. I know how difficult it is, so when they say I'm not going to be able to get that done today, I know they've tried their best, because and sometimes it's good not to be a really punishing boss, because you get their support and you'll work with them. Always lead by example and lead from the front, I think, and that seems to work quite
Spencer,
well.
has come to that time of the evening where you're going to ask the Holy Grail question.
Okay. So we'll start with Sarah. If you could have any watch, what would be your number one piece in watches?
By the way, this is going on Spencer's Christmas list, so be creative and imaginative and go for it.
Right, well, I think I've got to say
Rolex,
Rolex, and I've probably got to say Daytona.
Yeah.
Be lovely, really nice.
And
really
what metal?
nice.
What would you say? The gold or the steel one?
I think I know my husband will be on my shoulder here going, the gold. You've got to have the gold, Sarah. So I think I think the gold is beautiful.
I agree with you.
I'll make a note of that one, Spencer.
And Kevin, over to you. What would you have to say?
I would go for the watch that's on the screen behind you, the ceramic Daytona,
the white, the polar,
exactly that one. That's beautiful.
I've got a fake one I can sell you.
Have you? Probably the closest I get to it, don't worry.
Yeah.
Right,
no,
Spencer, I'll chalk both of those up on the Christmas list then.
Okay.
I've worked out so far from the shows we've had, you're running into 640 grand at your own prices currently.
I need Kevin to help me find some watches, I think, somewhere.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Spence, we're pretty much out of time now. You can wrap up the show and thank everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, it's been really interesting. What can I say? You know, I've said we could sit here for hours listening to both of you, but really appreciate you, Sarah and Kevin, for coming to meet us today. And Gavin, thank you.
I've thoroughly enjoyed being this side of the camera for this show.
What can I say? This is one of my quieter shows. I've had to sit here and listen. As you know, I love asking all the questions, but it's really been great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget to hit the subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.